The Island of Blood and Bones. Two best friends, Ella and Taylor, had been planning their vacation to the Philippines for months. They had always dreamt of exploring the pristine beaches, rich culture, and vibrant cuisine of the islands. Little did they know that their paradise would soon turn into a nightmare that would haunt them forever. Their journey began with a flight into Manila, where they explored the bustling city streets, indulging in street food like balut, fertilized duck egg, and isaw, grilled chicken intestines. The energy of the city, with its mix of old Spanish architecture and modern skyscrapers, was intoxicating. They took pictures, tasted exotic dishes, and were carefree, unaware of the dark forces silently closing in on them. Their next stop was the island of Palawan, famous for its crystal-clear waters, and the Puerto Princesa underground river. They kayaked through caves and snorkeled among vibrant coral reefs. On their final day in Palawan, they decided to take a boat trip to a remote beach recommended by a local, a place away from the usual tourist crowds. This decision would be their undoing. As they arrived at the isolated beach, the crystal waters were beautiful, but the area felt off, eerily quiet, almost as if the land itself was holding its breath. When their boat docked, a man in tattered clothes, his eyes darting nervously, approached them. He warned them not to venture too far into the jungle, but they shrugged it off as superstition. As they walked through the dense underbrush, the jungle seemed to close in around them. Strange noises echoed from all directions. Low growls, whispers, and the sound of something skittering in the shadows. They stumbled upon a secluded compound, a small, dilapidated structure hidden among the trees. The faint smell of burning incense filled the air. It wasn't until they stepped closer that they realized the compound was far from abandoned. It was alive. They were met by a woman, tall and elegant, her skin pale and flawless. Wearing an ornate headdress, she introduced herself as Maria, a local guide, though her eyes seemed too cold, too knowing for someone who claimed to be a mere tourist guide. She offered them drinks, dark, sweet, and heavily spiced. And though it tasted odd, they drank. It wasn't until it was too late that they realized they'd been drugged. The world around them blurred as they collapsed into unconsciousness. When Ella woke, she found herself in a dark room, bound to a stone altar. Taylor was beside her, struggling to free himself. The air was thick with the stench of decay and incense. In front of them stood Maria, her expression no longer warm, but cold and twisted. Behind her, shadows moved, swirling like smoke. "We've been waiting for you," Maria said, her voice carrying an unnatural, melodic undertone. Before they could react, a procession of hooded figures entered the chamber. The group was led by a man, tall, gaunt, and dressed in luxurious robes. His eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and his skin was unnaturally smooth, as if it had never seen the sun. He raised his hand, and the group fell silent. "We are the cult of Sanguine," the man intoned. "You, my dear guests, have been chosen for a very special purpose. The Great One has been starving, and you will provide the feast." Ella and Taylor fought against their restraints, but they were weak from the drugs, and the cultists easily overpowered them. The robed figures began chanting in a language neither of them understood. The leader, with a wicked grin, began to prepare a blood sacrifice, not just to a deity, but to an ancient and terrifying being that they could not see, but whose presence they felt pressing down upon them like a crushing weight. The air seemed to grow thick with power as the shadows in the room twisted and writhed. The Great One, the unseen deity, was awakening. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and a deep, guttural roar echoed through the temple. Something huge stirred beneath the earth, its presence suffocating, dark, and hungry. The cultists were ecstatic. This was the moment. Their great one would rise and consume everything. But just as the sacrifice was about to begin, a surge of adrenaline coursed through Ella's veins. Desperation made her strong, and she managed to break free from her restraints. Taylor followed her lead, and together they fought back with all their might. They grabbed whatever they could, rocks, broken wood, anything, and used it to fend off the cultists. In the chaos, Ella and Taylor managed to escape the temple. The jungle was still silent, but it felt like the air itself was alive, watching them. As they ran through the dense trees, they could hear the cultists chanting behind them, their voices growing fainter. They stumbled upon a road and flagged down a passing vehicle, a jeepney. They were barely able to explain what had happened before they collapsed in exhaustion. But the nightmare didn't end there. As they recovered in a hospital, they began to piece together the horrifying truth. Maria was not a local guide. She was part of a much larger human trafficking ring, and the cult was a front for an underground society of rich elites involved in blood rituals to summon an ancient, monstrous entity. It turned out that this cult had connections not only to drug cartels, but also to powerful figures in the Philippine government. The trafficking network stretched far beyond the islands, and the blood sacrifices were just a way to keep the Great One alive, a creature tied to the darkest corners of human history. Ella and Taylor were free, but their bodies and minds were forever scarred. The authorities had no interest in investigating the cult, and the more they dug, the more they realized that the island was built upon secrets too dangerous to expose. The nightmares didn't stop. Each night, they would hear the whispers of the cultists calling to them, tempting them back to the island. They would never forget the face of the Great One, the glowing eyes, the fangs, the hunger. And as time passed, they realized they weren't the only ones who had escaped. The Philippines was a beautiful place. Breathtaking beaches, delicious dishes like sinigang, adobo, and lechon, and stunning landmarks like Rizal Park and Chocolate Hills. But now, Ella and Taylor saw the darker side of the country, a side woven into the very fabric of the land. And somewhere, deep in the jungle, the cult of Sanguine waited.